Secretary Cohen, thanks for talking with us today. I know you've been expressing some concerns about the prospect of a second Trump administration. What's on your mind about that? What are you worried about?
Well, I've worried about it prior to his election. I felt that he was not fit to be commander-in-chief based on the actions that I saw him take, the way he denigrated John McCain, the way he mocked a handicapped reporter, the way he mocked a Gold Star family. Things that I had read about and seen made me very wary of him serving in that capacity. And I think ever since he has been president, I've had those concerns validated in my own mind, that he doesn't feel that there's any law that applies to him. And I've been, based on my training, my whole background has been as a lawyer, the rule of law, that everyone is subject to the rule of law. The president occupies a unique position in our society, but he is not above the law. And I just felt that he has stated time and again, because I'm president, everything that I do and say must be adhered to and doesn't violate the law. So when it comes time to directing all of the states, they will reopen their business. Whether or not they want to impose restrictions or wear masks or whatever, he says, no, I'm the one, I'm the president of the United States and I give the direction. Well, that's not how the country is organized, that we do have states' rights, et cetera. And I feel that he just, by temperament, by his demonstrations every day, he flaunts his power and he flouts the rule of law. And I see it in terms of how he treats our military, diverting necessary funds from the military to the wall without any authority against the law as such. I saw how he treated our military when he ordered Secretary Jim Mattis, when he was serving as Secretary of Defense, get our troops out of Syria now, without any consultation with the CENTCOM commander, without any consultation with our allies, putting our own troops at risk by demanding they leave immediately, and then be subject to the Russians moving in and taking over our bases, putting them in jeopardy. So, and then when it comes to the COVID-19, the president is obligated to protect and defend the Constitution and the people of this country. And he likes to cite George Patton. I can't imagine George Patton saying to any state, be it New York or Arizona or Florida, you're on your own. The enemy has attacked us. He has said we have an unseen enemy, and that is true. He is obligated as the commander-in-chief to protect and defend us against this enemy. And yet he tells the states, you're on your own, you deal with this. We don't have to have a national program. We don't have to set national standards so that all 50 states are on the same page. Each state can do what it wants to do, comply or not comply. But I'm not in it. I'm not in this fight, even though he declared he was a wartime president. I think he's missing in action. And for a variety of reasons, I just feel that his whole mission is to divide the American people. This is a unique experiment in the world, that we celebrate and welcome diversity. It's called a noble experiment, to take people of diverse backgrounds, ethnicities, race, religions, and to meld it into the United States of America. And what I see him doing day after day after day is trying to divide us along racial lines, ethnic lines, pointing out to people he calls thugs, celebrating Confederate generals. Confederate generals were traitors. They tried to divide this country, to secede from this country, basically, and they're traitors, and they lost. And yet now he wants to celebrate the Confederacy. And I've always wondered why we have to recognize the Confederacy and allow people to fly the Confederate flag. They were really, their cultural values were to enslave people, to hold people in bondage, to treat them as subhuman. So for all of those reasons, I believe he has failed to measure up to what is required of the President of the United States, and that is to heal a country that is in trouble, heal the divisions in our country, serve as a role model that everyone can look up to and say, the President of the United States inspires me. And what he has done is he's inspired his band of supporters, but he has failed to try and hold this diverse country together and to celebrate the ideals of this country. And for that reason, I just feel he'll be a real danger. He feels no restrictions now against the use of power. If he is reelected, there'll be no concern on his part that he has to listen to anyone. Right now, as he's going to reelection, he has to worry about whether or not he's going to pull the Senate with him or the House, recapture the House. Once he is reelected, he can do anything he wants and saying, I don't have to worry about the public. I can do what I please. I've always felt that way. And now it's been confirmed that the American people, by their college vote, if not the popular vote, have reaffirmed that I have absolute power. And I don't believe any person should have absolute power. That's the whole purpose of our system, was checks and balances to make sure no branch got distinctly too powerful that it was dominant in our society. And so for those reasons, Pat, I could go on. Those are the reasons why I feel that he has failed to measure up to the responsibilities of the commander-in-chief, both for our military, and the most recent allegations, of course, come from intelligence, which shows that the Russians may have, again, not proved, but in my judgment, it doesn't have to be proved beyond a reasonable doubt. The CENTCOM commander said he couldn't take it to a court of law. We don't expect our generals who are in charge of protecting our troops to go to a court of law to defend them. When they receive intelligence that the Russians may have a fund that they're using to put a bounty on the heads of our soldiers, that's something that you have to act on that. You have to bring that to the highest levels. And the notion that the president doesn't read the presidential daily brief, I mean, this is critical, that if he doesn't read it, someone, his national security advisor, his secretary of defense, his chairman of the Joint Chiefs, the CIA director, the NSA, all of the intelligence community gets that. Someone has to say, Mr. President, we have at least some evidence that the Russians are doing this. You need to know this before you talk to the president of Russia next. You need to call him on this. You need to tell him, if this is true, there will be serious consequences coming your way. So far, the president has not said a word. And so for all of those reasons, for failing to protect our men and women in the field, that's his obligation. This is the highest obligation he has. When you send our men and women out into hostile territory to fight and defend the freedom of others, and ultimately for us, for our freedom as well, you have a duty. You have an absolute duty, not an absolute power. You have an absolute duty to provide protection for them at the highest levels. And I don't think he's done that. I don't understand why he has failed to criticize President Putin. I remember a week, I was on television on CNN the week after his election. I was going to say his inaugural. And I was on a panel, and I said there are several questions that have to be asked with the President of the United States. Number one, what do you own? Two, what do you owe? And three, to whom do you owe it? I wanted to know, why he has refused to turn over his tax returns over the last 20 years. I need to know why he has not shown them to the key people on Capitol Hill, at least, never mind to the general public, but to at least the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, or those who have an absolute obligation to oversee the functions of the executive branch. I need to know, and the American people should want to know, is the president indebted to anyone, to any country? If so, disclose it so we'll be able to judge whether you're acting out of the national interest, out of your own interest. To date, he has refused to do that. So
let me ask you this: you mentioned the checks and balances that we're supposed to have in our system. Has the Republican-led Senate, in particular, failed to be a check on this president?
I think they fear him. I've said this before. I think it's either fear or complicity. He is well known, again, against any other president in the history of our country that I'm aware of, in the way that he will go after members of his own party or anyone, but basically members of his own party. If they raise a question, if they challenge him on an issue, he puts a tweet out energizing his base saying they're lacking patriotism. They're enemies of the country. They don't support me. And then he demeans them with derogatory labels. And so suddenly their offices are inundated with hate mail, with threats. He has called the media the enemy of the people. So now every reporter is subject to abuse whenever they cover any of his rallies or comments. They now become targets of abuse. This is the mark of a dictatorship. This is what tyrants do, is to discredit the media. Anyone, and your job is to be critical. I mean, I've understood this from all of my years in public office. The job of the media is to hold me accountable for everything I do and say as a public trustee. I am a fiduciary. And your job is to make sure that I uphold the standards of a trustee. And so, yes, you're going to be critical, not simply for the sake of being critical, but to make sure I'm doing my job. And for me to label you as an enemy of the people, especially as the President of the United States, really puts you in jeopardy. And I think that is just one thing that he has done that I think is, again, the mark of a dictator. Discredit the media. Make sure you discredit your own intelligence.